Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4 Wheel Parts. Today I've got a quick episode to talk about some lessons learned based off of iRacing and some of the recent events and recent issues that have cropped up with that. So we're going to talk about that, some of the ways that you can maybe improve the way that you're approaching the iRacing situation or how you're handling iRacing if you're doing it right now. So we're going to talk through a few of those things. I've really got 3 key takeaways that I want to kind of break down for you. But before that, there's a few things I want to go over with you. One is 4 Wheel Parts. So they have the Get Dialed for Spring sales event going on right now, and a lot of people at this exact moment are starting to receive their stimulus checks from the government. So this might be an opportunity if you've been waiting for a set of wheels or bumpers or whatever for your vehicle. That's part of the intent of this, is to try to spend that money and get things flowing in the economy. That might be an opportunity for you. I also get it if you're facing a layoff or something. Maybe you're not going to want to send that money out of your bank account right now. But either way, if you are, I want you to consider these things, right? Like, look at 4 Wheel Parts. They've got good deals. They still have a lot of their locations that are open. I know several parts of the country are still locked down, but they have 95 stores, and a lot of them are open, and all those openings are listed on their website. They also have 12-month promotional financing right now to help with, just spreading that payment out over time. So if you got questions about that, you can always reach out to me or head out to 4wheelparts.com. And I would love to get your feedback about the show. Head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review, or you can always shoot me an email, josh@sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. And then subscribe, that way you don't miss any of our upcoming shows. Now, this episode here was brought to you by 4 Wheel Parts and several other amazing companies. AMSOIL, TopThePodium.com, Crash Addict Industries, and also we have several other partners that behind the scenes really help make this thing happen. That's including UTV Sports Mag, where we produce a monthly column called Sponsor This. Then there's MBRP, HMK USA, Sudboy Traction, and of course High Octane Coffee. And in a minute, you'll hear from Joe Sylvester with your High Octane Coffee marketing tune-up. And then right after that, we'll get into the episode about lessons learned for iRacing.
What's up, guys? Joe Sylvester here with your High Octane Coffee marketing tune-up of the day. Today, I want to talk about being omnipresent. Omnipresent means being in more than one place. Don't focus on just building your Instagram or just building your YouTube or just building your Facebook, or solely relying on just the sponsors or just the stickers on the side of your car and expect that is going to deliver value and return on investment for sponsors. Make yourself present in your local community. Make yourself present at the race car tracks, car shows, even hot rod shows. Offer to bring your race car out, put it on display, shake hands, kiss babies, give out autograph cards. Any kind of charity work with children's hospitals, maybe more animal hospitals are your thing, animal rescues. Maybe making some appearances at local schools. Little kids love race cars. Use that to your advantage and make a positive impact on your community. Also, trade shows, things like PRI, SEMA. These are all things that are very important for you in building your brand and being, like I said, omnipresent. Make sure that when you're making that phone call or you're sending that email, that sponsor has already met you. That person has already come in contact with you face to face, and you're going to be a step up on the game.
Today's topic is based on actually an unfortunate issue that cropped up this week in the iRacing world, but I've pulled out some lessons and conclusions from it. Now, in recent shows, I've talked a lot about how iRacing is something that you might want to be looking into right now. Maybe based off of COVID-19 and coronavirus, all this pandemic stuff happening right now, maybe eSports and iRacing is something you should be seriously considering getting into. So I've talked about that, and there's lots of pros and and maybe some cons to it, but there's lots of pros to look at that right now. A number of racers have done that successfully over the past few weeks. They've gotten into the sport and they've converted a lot of their efforts to the iRacing world, which is fantastic. And Jim Beaver, who has been into iRacing now for a little over a year, he hosted a race this week where he headlined racers from multiple disciplines of real life racing. I say real life, like I know real people are playing the iRacing simulations, but I'm just going to try to make that distinction here as there's like the physical world and then the virtual world. So maybe that's a better way of saying it. But he took racers from the physical world and also from the iRacing virtual world and kind of meshed them together. But we saw people like Travis Pastrana, Mia Chapman, Joe Sylvester, all racing on the same course together, which was just awesome. I think that it got like 170,000 views, or at least viewers. I can't remember the exact number, but that's pretty groundbreaking for this type of event. Now, I can talk all day about the upside of racers making a transition like this during the current pandemic, but this show is going to be more about key lessons learned. And like I said, it's going to be based off of one specific event, but I've kind of extrapolated that. So someone recently in iRacing, they made that transition to iRacing, right? They went from the physical world to the virtual world. Like I said, I highly recommend looking at that. But they also made a very costly mistake. Now, this person made a racial slur during an iRacing live stream, and they were not aware at the time that their audio was being streamed. They shouldn't have said it regardless. Plain and simple. But I'm not really here to teach you that lesson. I don't want you ever saying racial slurs, period. I don't even want you thinking racial slurs, period. That shouldn't be a lesson that I need to teach. All right, so I'm not going to focus on that. What I do want to discuss is the other ways your behavior on eSports or iRacing live streams could positively or negatively impact your brand. So I want to use this example here as a data point of what can happen. And then, like I said before, extrapolate on that just a little bit. So just want to be clear here. This racial slur thing is ridiculous and it shouldn't be happening. All right. I'm not going to get into it any further than that. But like I said, I'm going to now use that to say what are some other things that might be happening in these live streams that you should be thinking about and you should be learning about now. That's less intrusive and obvious of an issue as the racial slur piece was for this racer. All right, so I have 3 kind of points that I'm going to cover, and it's going to start with a little bit more direct about like in the live streams, and it's going to kind of back out to, from a promotional standpoint, what you might want to start thinking about. So kind of I'll span a spectrum here of things I want you to consider for lessons learned. But it's really only 3 things, so it's a relatively quick and short episode. So the first main point is the one that I really wanted to hammer home in this episode, and that's, although you might be alone during these iRacing events, you're not really alone. You might be sitting in your living room or garage or some converted basement where you have a rig set up that's connected to an internet connection, and you might feel like you're alone. But there's people watching you. There's people listening at times, and yeah, I just want to talk through some of that a little bit. Now, in a normal race, you likely have some communication back to like a crew chief or someone via radio channel. Your crew knows you, and maybe the viewership of radio communications is relatively small, but in some cases you have zero communication, right? There's no connection back to anybody. You're just alone in your helmet. Now, what you say in your helmet is, at that point, is all yours and nobody else's, right? It's just you. That's not the case in iRacing. What you say could be broadcast to a group of people, and what we've talked about before with 170,000 folks could be a big group of people, maybe a much bigger group than you're used to being around. You might not even know that it's happening at the time. So when you flip your e-car over in a race and start cussing about it, there's a potential that everyone could hear it. When you blow a fake tire, and I don't even know if you can blow a tire in a iRacing, but I think so. When you blow a fake tire in an iRacing event and you let out a comment like, just like in real life, these General tires suck, or something like that, everyone hears it. Or they could, right? The potential is there. When you cuss out the racer who just eye slid into you and caused you to eye spin out, everyone could hear that. Now, this is a less curated version of you that might not align with your brand or your sponsor's brand. I use the term less curated because a lot of things that we talk about in the show is like how you present yourself in public or on social media, and for the most part, you can control those things. But this is a little bit more of a raw state of emotion, I think, for people when you're racing. Like, it's a little bit more difficult, I think, to control what you're doing and saying when you're in the middle of a race, and now it could be broadcast to a lot of people. So this is kind of an interesting connection, and I know that iRacing is much more than just video games, but I also know that when I'm playing video games, or when I used to, I don't really play video games too much anymore, but when I used to, there's some raw emotions that came out. So I remember when I was younger and I was playing video games, and actually I see this in my 7-year-old now, that he's starting to get into some video games. If something silly would happen, I would flip out, and I know I've thrown controllers in the past, and that happens sometimes, but it can't happen when you are being sponsored by a company in a iRacing event that's being broadcast. That kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated very long. Now, in the case of a racial slur, guaranteed you will be banned from the program, and your sponsors will leave you in a heartbeat. Like, we just saw that happen, and that's what should happen. But some of these smaller reactions or comments might hurt your brand over time and cause sponsors to back away slowly. Now, on the flip side, let's say that you show sportsmanship when someone passes you around the last corner of the last lap in an iRacing event. If people see that, what if you make positive comments about other racers throughout an event? What if you use an opportunity you have during the event to have your comments live streamed during a race to promote your brand or your sponsor's brand? I don't know. Whew, this is a tough race. Glad I downed a monster before starting, right? Something like that. There's opportunities to turn this additional exposure into a positive reflection of who you are and your brand, instead of those maybe mishaps or points where you lose some control, instead of those defining who you are. So think about those things. That's probably the most important thing in this show. I started when I set out to kind of scripting out the show, that was the only thing I was going to talk about. And then there's just a few other things that came up along the way that I wanted to hit on. So I wanted to start with that, really hammer that piece home. If you don't know about these examples of people losing everything because they made some really stupid comments during an iStream event, you can go look for that. I'm not gonna put their name out here right now. I'm sure you probably already know if you're at all tuned into motorsports right now, but if not, just know that it happened, and it could happen to you, and it shouldn't happen to you. And that's why you're listening to the show, is you don't want some of these mistakes to cause you issues. You want to learn ahead of time and prevent that stuff from happening. All right, so right now I'm going to take a quick break to thank the sponsors for this podcast, and then we'll come back and hit the next 2 points in this podcast. 2 questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you gotta check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is SponsoredRiderClubPodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistall of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to topthepodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Let's talk about your truck for a minute. You can count on it to haul your vehicle and your gear to the track or to the trailhead, but I bet you never think about the motor oil. Here's why you should. Your oil is the only thing preventing your engine from wearing out and breaking down. To keep your truck running strong, look for an oil with added wear protection. Like, for example, AMSOIL Signature Series Synthetic Motor Oil. It delivers 75% more engine protection against horsepower loss and wear than is required by the leading industry standard. It provides the next level protection today's demanding engines need to keep running for years and to keep effortlessly towing your ride to the track. Go to AMSOIL.com/rider to find out more. Make the switch to AMSOIL Synthetic Motor Oil today to keep your vehicle running great. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. Welcome back, everybody, to the second half of this show where we are talking about lessons learned from iRacing, especially over recent weeks here where it's picked up a lot based off of the pandemic. So here are my next few points. The one here that I'm going to kick off for this half of the show is new forms of breaking down. So in the physical world, sometimes your car gives out right before the start of a race. It might leave months of prep work in the dust. Well, things like that can happen in iRacing as well. They present themselves in different ways, but they can happen, right? Maybe your rig has an electrical glitch. And when I say rig, I'm talking about like your console, the video game setup that you have. I feel like iRacing and eSports people are like, dude, stop calling it a video game. But hey, I'm learning too. I'm learning with the rest of us right now. But, maybe the rig has electrical glitch. Maybe the network gives out and you're not able to do the race like you had anticipated. All right, so just like in a physical race, also, you might be interviewed about what happened shortly after you have forfeited the race. My advice is stay calm and composed. So, funny story, if you would have known me, 15 years ago and heard me give that advice, you would have probably laughed in my face because I was anything but calm and composed. Don't get me wrong, I still have my moments, but I learned over the years to cope with my anger when stuff doesn't go as planned, and you might need to do the same. This kind of goes back to my comment earlier about like throwing a controller, right? Like the way that you respond to a network issue might be very similar to the way you would have responded to your car not starting. So you need to be calm and composed, maybe laugh it off, and then focus on how to prevent the problem from happening again, right? Some of the more experienced and composed racers will do that in a post-race interview. Hey, had this issue, tires blew. I really need to work on when I'm coming into these obstacles, like picking a better line. I definitely put the tire in a bad spot, and that's something I need to do some studying on. Next time that won't happen again, right? I think you need to look at that as well. Hey, I had some connection issues. I think I'm going to work with my local broadband company and see if there's ways that I can prevent this from happening. Something's wrong with my setup here. I'm going to work on that and come back stronger than ever. I mean, I think that the way you handle these new forms of breaking down is going to be similar to the way you've handled other, physical world forms of breaking down, with which most people have become accustomed to. Like, they know how to handle that. I think you're going to have to approach that in a similar way. I think that approach will do better for your brand and for your sponsors' brands. So I wanted to hit that new forms of breaking down. I'll tell you what, though, it is interesting when that does happen on these races. It's like even the commentators, it's new for them, right? Well, how do I talk about this, right? A connection issue can have just as big of an impact as a blown motor on somebody's race. And we're talking, these are real money in these races and real exposure, and it's just really interesting. So there's a lot on the line for these races too. So my last point that I wanted to drive home here is probably the biggest separation from what we have talked about previously. New forms of breaking down, and that a lot of people can hear and see you when you don't really know that they are. This one is about promoting the race or event. So iRacing now offers many more people the opportunity to view the races that were previously harder to watch. For example, off-road short course racing wasn't as accessible as, say, like NASCAR, for example. Now, though, with the right promotion, these things can blow up, like in a good way. I'm saying, like, the exposure can just go through the roof and be well beyond what expectations were. The virality of social media can start kicking in. I honestly couldn't see myself fully enjoying an iRacing event until I watched Jim Beaver's race this past week. It was awesome. I don't have cable, or at least not the traditional means of accessing racing events, but I've got Wi-Fi, I've got Facebook, I've got a cell phone, and I was able to easily watch this race and see what was going on, and it really impressed me with how fun it was to watch and how dynamic it was, and seeing the different disciplines in there. But the main thing I want to talk about here is, why did I see it? It's because Jim Beaver and Joe Sylvester, namely the ones that I saw doing this, because I follow them on social media and they were part of the event, they were promoting it like crazy. They were talking about it a lot, sharing different links, and you should be doing the same, I think. If you want to get into iRacing, but you don't really know where to start, you might be able to start by promoting other racers and other iRacing events and making those connections. So I think that promoting an event isn't new, right? I'm not telling you something that you're like, oh, wow, this is groundbreaking information. But I think when it comes to iRacing, it's like your promotion on social media can greatly improve the attendance, quote unquote, at the event. Where normally you might promote an event but people I have to get tickets or on a plane or a train, or I'd have to drive so many miles to get there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Whereas with iRacing, it's like, well, yeah, sure, I can tune in on Saturday at 6 p.m. on someone's Facebook page. I think it just opens up that opportunity a little bit more. Even beyond that, right? Let's say they can't tune in at that time to the live stream, but they can watch it afterwards. It's kind of like the next evolution, I think, of some of the Facebook Live and Instagram Live opportunities, and these things can be watched afterwards, after the fact. So I think that's a big opportunity and a lessons learned from this past week of iRacing and eSports of what you might be able to do if you're thinking about getting into it and you want to start promoting it yourself, or if you already are into it, taking a really active role in the promotion piece. All right, well, like I said from the beginning, this was going to be a shorter episode, but I hope it was an impactful one. But at this point, I am going to close things out and leave you with this. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by 4-Wheel Parts. I want you to make sure that you are subscribed to this show, whether it's on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss upcoming guests and upcoming episodes. And then follow us on social media. We're on all of the platforms. You can find out the most content, though, on our Facebook page. That's where we do our live videos. To get some insider access to upcoming guests, you can also check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. It is a support network where you can ask questions about best practices and get feedback from our audience. And I also highly encourage you to check out our column in UTV Sports Magazine called Sponsor This. A special thanks goes out to our sponsors, 4-Wheel Parts, AMSOIL, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and High Octane Coffee. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.